Countries are starting to hoard food. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. I have my stein of coffee as always, and I thought we'd have a look at this article from Bloomberg regarding countries starting to hoard food. Little concerning, definitely a little concerning if this is happening on a national level and it's a threat to global trade. I mean, trade is also in a lot of issues, guys. It's in trouble. So let's have a look. We're tracking the latest on the illness outbreak and the global response, and this is their plug for their daily thing. So it's not just grocery shoppers who are hoarding pantry supplies. Some governments are moving to secure domestic food supplies during the illness pandemic. Well, there you go. I mean, is that a smart move? Is that a smart move? We've seen in the media, have you all seen these people have run out there and hoarded all this food, and then they're throwing it all out because they're buying food that can only last a few days and then realizing, oh, oops, it's all gone bad. They're not hoarding, well, they're hoarding toilet paper. They're not hoarding like cans of Spam. I mean, I've got months and months of meat, but that's more so because we got in the habit of buying beef and animal meat in bulk because it was cheaper. Hence why I went and did my my generator trip yesterday, just in case I lose power for a couple of days. See, another excuse to buy camping toys, guys. That's you gotta take advantage of it. Support retail by buying camping equipment. So, Kazakhstan, one of the world's biggest shippers of wheat flour, banned exports of that product along with others, including carrots, sugar, and potatoes. I wonder if Australia could even do that. I wonder if we even would. I mean, we're a food producer too. I wonder how many of our food production businesses are owned by foreign countries. Just a question. Here's one for you all. During the Cold War, how many milk factories and farms and water supplies were sold to the Soviet Union? Just let me know in the comments if that actually happened. Vietnam temporarily suspended new rice export contracts. Serbia has stopped the flow of its sunflower oil and other goods, while Russia is leaving the door open to shipment bans and said it's assessing the situation weekly. So these are countries that are getting concerned, everyone. They're getting concerned. Should Australia be concerned? I mean, right now, I think food... I went shopping yesterday, seemed fine. There was food everywhere. Sure, I could only buy a certain number of toilet paper rolls, but, how are you finding it in your shops, guys, if you're stocking up? To be perfectly clear, there have been just a handful of moves and no sure signs that much more is on the horizon. Still, what's been happening has raised a question. Is this the start of a wave of food nationalism that will further disrupt supply chains and trade flows? We've started to see this happening already. And all we can see is that the lockdown is going to get worse, said Tim Benton, Research Director of Emerging Risks at think tank Chatham House in London. Though food supplies are ample, logistical hurdles are making it harder to get products to where they're needed to be as the illness unleashes unprecedented measures, panic buying, and the threat of labor crunches. I mean, this is the thing, guys, with regards to food on a global level, a lot of it is to do with logistical issues. One example, I remember reading about this at uni because we had to do this whole subject. It was really taught by these green hippies. Strong green hippies, very socialist. And I remember I was just reading. And one example was that in the UK, there's a preference for chicken breasts. And all the leftover parts of the chicken would, or turkey or whatever other bird product, would be dumped on other markets cheaply. In some African nations, they were dumped on those markets very cheaply. So you think, oh, fantastic, these African nations get access to all this cheap food. But the problem is, it destroyed the local industry. So it destroyed their capacity to compete and their capacity to actually ensure their own food integrity. So they became dependent, in some regards, to this imported product. So that's the conundrum that you have here. That's the danger. Because what happens if that imported product stops off, disappears? So it's not as... There are concerns and considerations that need to be weighed up. So consumers across the globe are still loading their pantries, and the economic fallout from the illness is just starting. The spectre of more trade restrictions is stirring memories of how protectionism can often end up causing more harm than good. The adage rings especially true now, as the moves would be driven by anxiety and not made to respond to crop failures or other supply problems. As it is, many governments have employed extreme measures, setting curfews and limits on crowds, or even on people venturing out for anything but to acquire essentials. Hello, Australia. That could spill over to food policy, said Anne Berg, an independent consultant and veteran agricultural trader who started her career at Louise Dreyfus Co. in 1974. You could see wartime rationing, price controls, and domestic stockpiling, she said. Some nations are adding to their strategic reserves. China, the biggest rice grower and consumer, pledged to buy more than ever before its domestic harvest, even though the government already holds massive stockpiles of rice and wheat, enough for 1 year of consumption. Key wheat importers, including Algeria and Turkey, have also issued new tenders, and Morocco said a suspension on wheat import duties will last through to mid-July. So this is an interesting map here showing food dependence, trade as a share of domestic food supply. So Australia is definitely a net exporter. Guys, we are a net exporter. Look at Africa. Look at China. Look at India. Look at the UK. Look at Scandinavia, even Germany, Spain, Mexico. The States is barely a net exporter. Canada is. There you are. So, guys, you can see, I think Australia and New Zealand, I think we're okay. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Australia's always been a breadbasket for much of the world. As governments take nationalistic approaches, they risk disrupting an international system that has become increasingly interconnected in recent decades. Kazakhstan had already stopped exports of other food staples like buckwheat and onions before the move this week to cut off wheat flour shipments. That latest action was a much bigger step, with the potential to affect companies around the world that rely on the supplies to make bread. For some commodities, a handful of countries or even fewer make up the bulk of exportable supplies. Disruption to those shipments would have major global ramifications. Take, for example, Russia, which has emerged as the world's top wheat exporter and a key supplier to North Africa. Vietnam is the third largest rice exporter, sending many of its cargoes to the Philippines. If governments are not working collectively and cooperatively to ensure there is a global supply, if they're just putting their nations first, you can end up in a situation where things get worse, said Benton of Chatham House. Well, maybe some of these nations need to ensure they have their own food integrity. I mean, seriously. What do you think is going to happen? The world isn't going to turn into a socialist utopia overnight. I know all these people want everyone to be collective and to cooperate with smiles, but there's always a risk that reality will set in. So, he warned that frenzied shopping coupled with protectionist policies could eventually lead to higher food prices, a cycle that could end up perpetuating itself. If you panic buy in the market for next year's harvest, then prices will go up, and as prices go up, policymakers will panic more, he said. And higher grocery bills can have major ramifications. Bread costs have a long history of kick-starting unrest and political instability. During the food price spike of 2011 and 2008, there were riots in more than 30 nations across Africa and Asia and the Middle East. Well, I mean, look at Africa as, why is Africa importing that much food, guys? Seriously, why? What about Egypt? Egypt used to be the breadbasket of the world. Well, a few thousand years ago, but still. Without the food supply, societies just totally break down. That's true. And we're starting to hear rumors of people in Italy threatening or planning to raid supermarkets for food. How long do you think till this would happen in Australia? How long do you think what would happen in a multicultural society? Do you think people will band together, or do you think there's a risk of increased tribalism? What's happened historically, guys? What's happened historically? Unlike previous periods of rampant food inflation, global inventories of staple crops like corn, wheat, soybeans, and rice are plentiful, said Dan Kowalski, Vice President of Research at CoBank, a $145 billion lender to the agricultural industry, adding he does not expect dramatic gains for prices now. But it's all to do with emotion. While the price spikes of the last decade were initially caused by climatic problems for crops, policies exacerbated the consequences. In 2010, Russia experienced a record heat wave that damaged the wheat crop. The government responded by banning exports to make sure domestic consumers had enough. The United Nations measure on global food prices reached a record high by February 2011. Given the problem that we are facing now, it's not the moment to put these type of policies into place, said Maximo Torero, chief economist at the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization. On the contrary, it's the moment to cooperate and coordinate. But people don't trust you. Does anyone trust the World Health Organization anymore? Do nations trust each other, guys? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Do you think Australia should be limiting, should be restricting? Or should we ensure that a certain amount of food is maintained in our nation? I, for one, am not worried about food supply in Australia. I think, if anything, as a net exporter, hopefully food may get cheaper. It might get cheaper. We'll have to see. What about all the suppliers that sell directly to cafes and restaurants? They're going to be in trouble now. They'll need to adapt their business. Maybe we'll start seeing mud crab at less than $50 a kilo delivered to your house. We'll have to see. So guys, thank you all for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you're a fan, you can support us through various ways. You can join the channel on YouTube or on Patreon for a small monthly fee. You can use our affiliate links at Amazon or eBay for your consumer purchases. We also have referral links at Independent Reserve and Kucoin for the crypto traders out there. You can buy our merch from HeiseSays or Teesprings. You can support us using PayPal for a direct donation, or send us gold via Gold Pass. Take care, guys. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next video.